sixth graders. I am excited for us to look at compare and contrast styles because we are gearing up to be ready to start our compare and contrast writing. So we need to learn some specific different types of compare and contrast styles. So there are some things we need to think about with compare and contrast. So you've read Steve versus Steve, which is an example of compare and contrast. And now we're going to look at some different things. So compare and contrast. Compare means how are things alike. Contrast means how are things different. So if I look at this food pyramid right here, you notice that you could say, okay, it's all food. That would be a way we compare them. You could say a difference is some are healthy and some are not. Another difference is some you should cook before you eat. Some are ready to eat. Some you can make, some you have to buy. So there's so many different ways where we can compare and contrast different things. So for example, if I had an apple and a butter, you could compare them and you could say they are both food. You could contrast them. You would say apples are better to eat as a snack than butter. You should not eat a stick of butter as a snack. So apples are a good snack. So the reasons that we compare and contrast is we might be explaining, which is what your essay is going to do. You're going to explain how to compare and contrast two topics. You can also, you do it to evaluate. You do this all the time. You go to Burger King, you're getting your drink, and you go, what kind of drink do I want? And you compare and contrast things in your mind as you're doing that. So when you choose your topic, you get to pick two topics to compare and contrast. And you wouldn't say, I'm going to compare birds to crayons. Like, that doesn't make sense. You would compare like cardinals to blue jays. You would pick something that makes sense. You wouldn't do trucks to crayons. Instead, maybe you're going to do Ford trucks compared to Chevy trucks or something like that. So you have to pick things that it makes sense to compare and contrast. So then first you're going to think, how are they alike? Apples and oranges, both fruit, both food, both made into juice, both grow on a tree. But then how are they different? The color, obviously. They have different textures. Apples and oranges grow in different places, like oranges are in warm states, apples are in cool states. Oranges you have to peel, apples you don't. So you're going to think through all these different similarities and differences. You use compare and contrast a lot. If you had to pick candy, you would decide, okay, which kind of candy am I going to pick? And do I want chocolate or do I want jelly beans? Do I want one that's good to share or not to share? Do I want a mint? If you're deciding, so you might compare. All these are sweet. None of them are sour. These are like medium size. None are big or small. But then you would think, how are these different? Especially if you're thinking, how can I share this? A mint is a really bad candy to share. How gross is that to like take a lick of a mint and then pass it to your friend? Gross. Instead, pick jelly beans or pick this chocolate that can be split into two really easily. So you do this compare and contrast thinking all the time in your mind. So on the slide, we think, okay, so if you want chocolate, you wouldn't choose jelly beans or the peppermint. If you wanted to share, you'd pick one that you can break. Maybe you pick plain chocolate because that's what you want. So all of that is compare and contrast. We're going to think now, how do I organize my writing with compare and contrast? And there are three main formats of how to compare and contrast. And you have a paper in front of you that's showing you the three formats. Turn to the side that has three columns of different formats for the compare and contrast. And I want you to imagine, we're going to imagine a couple things. So if you were comparing the movie of Percy Jackson to the books of Percy Jackson, say that's our topic that we're doing. First, it's important to have equal amounts. So for your two topics, you have to have about the same number of facts for each topic. If you're doing Michael Jordan versus Larry Bird, you need about the same number of topics and you want to know the same information, like where did they go to college? How many years were they in the NBA? Which teams did they play for? What are their career stats? All that kind of stuff. So we're comparing the same thing. So if I was doing a book to a movie, I want to compare the characters, the settings, and this says historical accuracy, but you would want to pick 3 different ways that you can compare them. So now these are three main ways. We have whole to whole, similarities to differences, and point by point. So Noah, can you close the door? Close the door, please. Noah, go out. Sorry. Noah, go out and close the door. Okay, so for whole to whole, this means we're going to compare all about one to all about the other. So if I was doing a whole to whole for Percy Jackson the book versus Percy Jackson the movie, I would tell all about one and then all about the other. So every type of compare and contrast writing, you're going to have a lead, you're going to have an ending. But, you first would tell all about the book, then you're going to tell all about the movie, and those are your 2 body paragraphs. So I want you to imagine if I was picking a topic, I would probably I would do Arizona compared to Florida. And so if I was doing whole to whole, I would have my lead and my ending, and then I would have 1 paragraph all about the Arizona, and I would have another paragraph all about Florida. So this is one whole compared to the other whole. Then, if I was doing similarities to differences, I'm thinking, what are all the ways that the 2 things are alike, and what are all the ways the 2 things are different? So in this one, you do lead and ending, and then this one, here's all the ways the book and the movie are alike. Here's all the ways the book and the movie are different. Thinking about states, I have my lead and my ending. So I think, what are all the similarities between Arizona and Florida? And then what are all the differences between my 2 states? So it's still 4 paragraphs, but it's organized differently what's inside the paragraphs. Next, we can do point to point. In this one, we think of different points of comparison. So if I was doing a movie and a book, I might compare the characters in the movie and the book, the setting of the movie and the book, and then the plot line of the movie and the book. And this really should list a 3rd point paragraph. So I would do my lead and ending, and then each point of comparison comes in then. So if I was doing this for Arizona and Florida, I would probably pick to do, so of course I have a lead and an ending. I'm going to do 1 paragraph about weather, and I tell for both. Then I say about, here's all the activities you can do in Arizona and all the activities you can do in Florida. Then I go to geography. What does the geography of Arizona look like? We've got all the cactuses and the mountains and the desert. Compared to the geography of Florida, we've got the ocean and the beaches and the flat lands and the lakes and the bayous and things like that. And then I come back to my ending. So this, we compare it on different points. So it's called point to point. So you're going to practice this now doing an assignment called Compare and Contrast Internet Articles. It's listed in Canvas. And in this, you need the paper that looks like this. So you have this paper. And then there's a link right here. Do you see where it says use this link? When you click that link, it's going to look like this, and it's going to give you a bunch of different articles you can choose to use. We've got Martin Luther and John Calvin. We have different animals. We have Meghan Markle and Kate Middleton's wedding dresses. We have iPhone comparisons. So you and your partners that are assigned to you will choose which articles you want to do. So I want you to imagine that we pick this top one, and we're going to go to this one right here. So if I click that one, it brings me to this right here. And I don't know if you can see that. Well, that's a problem. Okay, so if you go to that website, I'm going to have to just talk you through it. If I click on that, the article is called 10 Differences Between Martin Luther and John Calvin. So in my first box here, I'm going to write the title of the article. Right now, I want you to pull out your device, and I want you to go to find the assignment, and then go to this article. So pause the video for a second while everybody gets to the article comparing Martin Luther and John Calvin. Okay, Now that you're in the article, you need to first write the article title in the box called article title. Just write it down. If it's capitalized, like people's names, you need to capitalize it. This is a language arts assignment. I'm expecting you to use capital letters and spell things correctly if it's right on your screen. And then the next thing we're thinking is, what is being compared? Well, it says Martin Luther and John Calvin. So what is being compared is Martin Luther and John Calvin. So you're going to write that in the next box. And feel free to stop this video on pause whenever you need. Then we need to scan through the whole article because the compare and contrast style, we're deciding, is this whole to whole? Is it point to point? Is it similarities to differences? And if I scan through this article, and I want you to scan through it on your iPad with me, when I go down, notice it says, here are 10 reasons. And it says, first Luther, then Calvin. And it tells us when they first started. And then scroll down farther. And it says a prophet and a systematician. And so it's telling us what type of, how they were examining the Bible and what they were looking for. This next one is interesting to me, extroverts and introverts. Do you see this? It says, with regards to personality, Lutheran was extremely outgoing. He always had guests at home. He absolutely loved being with people. He conversed and joked and laughed with his friends. Calvin, on the other hand, never really felt comfortable in public ministry. Next, we have a different way they're comparing them. Point 4 is telling us we're looking at Luther as a pastor, Calvin as a professor. Oh, you might be asking, who is John Calvin? He is a major leader, a similar time period to Martin Luther in the Presbyterian Church. So also speaking up against the Catholic Church. Then we have their stature. It tells us Luther has a wide chest. He's a big man. Calvin had stomach problems. He's not a big man. So if you noticed, they're not talking first about Martin Luther, then about Calvin. That would be whole to whole. It's not doing that. It's not talking all about one and then all about the other. It's also not saying here's all the ways they're alike and then all the ways they're different. Instead, it's going through, here's one way to compare them. Here's another way. That is point to point. So in this article, we are looking at point to point because it's going through each separate point differently. Then the last box you need to do, so you need to figure that out. The last box you need to do is you need to figure out what's one comparison. And so I pulled this one out. I said Calvin was shy, Luther was outgoing is one way we can compare them. So you need to find one point of comparison. So you are going to do this for all 4 rows. You already have one row done now. This is your example row. In the compare and contrast style, you each time have 4 choices. Is it whole to whole? So it's all about one, then all about the other. Is it similarities to differences? It tells all the ways they're alike, all the ways they're different. Or is it point to point? It looks at one topic for both, another topic for both, another topic for both. That makes it point to point. So you're going to do this assignment and do it with your partners now. And then you'll turn it into Canvas. Goodbye.